Today I want to talk about how I've grown and learned about how to plan a unit over the course of Module 5. Through observing other teachers, I've noticed something that I've heard many times before, and that is that planning is very much key to being a teacher, and this is definitely evident in creating plans for a unit. Teachers who were more prepared had lessons that flowed more smoothly. They were able to respond and adapt to changes as well as the lessons progressed. When they knew clearly what the objectives were and what they wanted to have their students gain from each class, they were much better able to communicate those things to the students. Another thing that I took away from it is observing the use of formative assessment in the classroom. Teachers who used frequent formative assessment were much more aware of how their students were doing and how they were growing throughout the lessons. Teachers who didn't use this as much tended to be caught off guard during summative assessments, whether those were monthly quizzes or some type of large summative assignment involving a paper or an exam. They tended to be caught off guard when students would do badly. So because of that, they were much more reactive as a teacher, as opposed to being able to stay on top of a situation before it became a problem in the first place. It's one of the big things I took away from this entire module. Another thing is that teachers who made lessons are more student-centered, more engaged, were able to engage the students much better. When students were working on projects more often, or when students were involved simply in responding to each other, working together, answering questions frequently, they tended to remember and retain information better. When lessons are more lecture-based by the teacher, students tend to be less focused. They also, a major thing is when students would do work, they tended to be goofing off more during the more lecture-based classes. So for example, if a teacher would come in, talk for 20-30 minutes, then give students an assignment from the book, students would be much more unfocused. They might be handing notes to each other. This could be the individual class, but when students were involved in more activities and the lessons were centered on them, there was lots of discussion within the students, but that discussion was much more focused on the particular lesson and the objectives that the teacher wanted them to obtain. That was another thing that I was pretty impressive about the difference between the two. As far as my own planning, the biggest thing I took away was using formative assessment. Frequent use of formative assessment allowed you to stay on top of students that might be having trouble before they became a problem, especially with newer students come into the room. So by constantly checking at the end of the lesson who might have had trouble, also if perhaps the whole class was having trouble, you would be able to plan accordingly for the next lesson and be able to adapt to what you had to do next. The other thing was being able to unpack standards or goals that you might have for a unit and turn those into very clear objectives. Breaking them apart into the individual pieces that are required really helps you narrow down exactly what the skills are that the students need to learn and helps you communicate those to the students, makes it more clear and direct. The other thing I took away was that project-based learning was very impressive. Although I wasn't able to observe any personally at my school, I did see examples of it in YouTube, and I thought it was a great way to integrate cross-disciplinary activities and to have students also be mimicking real life challenges. So they're applying what they're learning in ways that they will as adults, solving problems, finding solutions, the kind of skills that you really want students to learn. This is why they go to school. So overall, my biggest takeaways of planning a unit were to constantly do formative assessment, make sure that students were involved in their own learning. And one of the best ways to do this is have them applying their knowledge to solve problems, create solutions, going high on Bloom's taxonomy to really use their creative skills and apply what they've learned. Thank you for listening today. Bye-bye.